It was supposed to be a normal afternoon at the bake shop. Children laughing, ovens humming, warm cinnamon floating in the air. Then the door opened softly, hesitantly. A destitute woman stepped inside, holding the hand of a tiny girl whose boots were worn thin, whose hair was tied with a fading band. The mother's eyes were weary, the kind of weary life carves into a person over years of surviving. They stood in front of the showcase filled with fresh pastries, bright icing, cherries glistening, decorations waiting for celebrations. The girl whispered, "Mama, can I choose one?" The mother swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then she leaned toward the counter clerk and whispered words so soft only 3 people in the room heard them. "Do you maybe have an expired tart, just something small? My daughter's birth anniversary is today." The counter clerk frowned. Behind her, a few patrons snickered under their breath, but someone else heard it too. Sitting in the corner booth, holding a tiny coffee cup in his inked hands, was Vincenzo Rossi, the most feared crime boss in the city. He saw the way the little girl tried to hide her disappointment. He saw the mother pretending not to notice the sneers, and he heard every word clearer than alarm bells. The counter clerk sighed impatiently. "No, ma'am, we don't give rubbish to patrons." The girl lowered her head. The mother blinked fast, holding back tears. The crime boss slowly stood up. His chair scraped the tile floor. The entire bake shop froze. He walked over, towering behind them, his shadow falling across the glass showcase. "Pardon me, he said, voice low, steady. The mother turned, terrified. She recognized him instantly, but instead of anger, there was something else in his eyes. He knelt down to the little girl, looked at her worn-out boots, her trembling smile, and asked gently, "Tell me, darling, what kind of pastry do you want for your birth anniversary?" What happened next would change all 3 of their lives forever. Stay with me until the end, because what the crime boss did next shattered everyone's expectations. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. The little girl's name was Amelia. She was 7 years old today, though she looked smaller than most children her age. Hunger has a way of stealing childhood, making bright eyes dimmer, making laughter quieter. Her mother, Clara, had been without a home for 8 months after losing their flat when the mill closed down. They had been surviving on community meals and whatever kindness strangers offered, which wasn't much. Amelia pointed to a lemon tart decorated with orange blooms and rainbow sprinkles. "That one," she whispered, then quickly added, "But the small slice is fine, Mama." Vincenzo Rossi had built his reputation on terror. Men twice his size trembled when they heard his name. He controlled half the city's covert operations, commanded loyalty through might, and settled disputes with methods that made grown men vanish without a trace. But as he looked down at this 7-year-old girl, asking for just a small piece of birth anniversary pastry, something cracked open inside his chest. The counter clerk, a young woman named Maya, shifted nervously. She recognized Vincenzo from the tabloids. Everyone in the neighborhood knew his face, knew the stories. Her hands shook as she gripped the counter. "Sir, I'm sorry, but our manager doesn't allow us to give away food." Shop policy. Vincenzo's dark eyes moved from the little girl to the counter clerk, then to the mother, who was pulling gently on her daughter's hand, trying to leave before things got complicated. The other patrons had gone completely silent. Even the coffee machine seemed to hold its breath. "How much for the whole tart?" Vincenzo asked, his voice carrying the weight of command that made people listen. Maya fumbled with the price tag. $38, sir." Claire stepped forward, panic in her voice. "Please, we don't need anything costly. We were just hoping maybe something old, something you might discard anyway. We don't want any trouble." Vincenzo reached into his coat. The movement made everyone in the bake shop tense up, but he only pulled out a thick leather billfold. He placed $250 bills on the counter. "I want that tart, the whole thing, and I want you to put 7 decorations on it. Can you do that?" Maya nodded frantically, her eyes wide. "Yes, sir. Absolutely." But Vincenzo wasn't finished. He turned to Clara, and when he spoke, his voice was gentler than anyone in that room had ever heard from him. "When's the last time you two had a proper meal?" Clara's chin trembled. "Yesterday morning, the shelter served morning food." The silence that followed was deafening. Even hardened criminals who worked for Vincenzo would have been shocked at what happened next. This man who had ordered hits, who had broken bones and ruined lives, who ruled through fear and violence, was looking at a destitute mother and her hungry daughter with something none of his enemies had ever seen in his eyes: pity. "Maya," he said, still not taking his eyes off Clara and Amelia, "I want you to box up 2 of your best sandwiches, some of those buns in the window, and whatever hot soup you have today. Put it all in a bag, sir. That'll be—" Maya started to calculate. "Just do it." He placed another 100 on the counter. "Keep the remainder." Amelia looked up at her mother with confusion. She had learned early in life that good things didn't happen to people like them. Strangers weren't kind. Adults didn't care about little girls with dirty clothes and worn-out boots. But this man, this scary man she had seen on television news reports, was asking about her birth anniversary pastry like it mattered to him. Clara was weeping now, quiet tears that she tried to hide by looking down. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Vincenzo was quiet for a long moment. In that silence, memories flooded back. Memories he had buried so deep he thought they were gone forever. His own 7th birth anniversary when his family had nothing. His mother proud and desperate, trying to make something special out of nothing. The way she had looked when neighbors turned them away. When shops refused to help. When the world decided that people like them didn't deserve kindness. Because he said finally, "Everyone deserves to feel important on their birth anniversary, especially little girls who ask for small pieces when they deserve the whole tart." Maya worked quickly, packing up the food while the tart was being prepared in the back. The other patrons watched in stunned silence as the most dangerous man in the city knelt down again to talk to Amelia. "You know what, darling? I think 7 decorations isn't enough for someone as special as you. How about we make it 8? 1 for good fortune." Amelia smiled for the first time that day. A real smile that reached her eyes and made her look like the child she was supposed to be. But what Vincenzo did next would shock everyone even more than his generosity. Because this story was about to take a turn that no one in that bake shop could have predicted. The tart arrived 15 minutes later, decorated with 8 bright decorations and Amelia's name written in delicate violet icing. But as Maya carried it to the counter, Vincenzo pulled out his phone and made a call that would turn this simple act of kindness into something much bigger. "Dante," he said into the phone, his voice carrying that familiar edge of command, "I need you to bring the vehicle around to the corner bistro bake shop and call Isabel. Tell her to prepare the visitor room upstairs. We're going to have guests." Clara's face went pale. She grabbed Amelia's hand tighter. "What's happening? We just wanted some tart. We don't need anything else." The other patrons began whispering frantically among themselves. They knew Vincenzo's reputation. When he made phone calls, people vanished. When he offered assistance, it usually came with caveats attached that could ruin you later. But Amelia was mesmerized by the tart. 8 decorations flickering like tiny stars. Her name spelled out in letters she could barely read but recognized as hers. For a moment, she forgot about being hungry, forgot about sleeping in shelters, forgot about her mother's worried tears late at night. "Can I extinguish them now, Mama?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. Vincenzo looked at Clara, understanding the terror in her eyes. This woman had learned to survive by avoiding men like him, by keeping her head down, by never accepting help that might come with a price she couldn't afford to pay. "You think I'm going to harm you?" he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I understand why, but let me tell you something, Clara. I know your name because I've been observing you and your daughter for 3 weeks." Clara's blood turned to ice. She pulled Amelia closer, ready to run, ready to leave the tart and the food and everything behind if it meant keeping her daughter safe. "Wait," Vincenzo said, raising his hand. "You sleep in the alley behind the parish on Elm Street. You take Amelia to the playground every morning so she can play on the swings before the other kids arrive. You spend your afternoons at the library because it's warm and safe and Amelia can read books you can't afford to buy her." Clara was trembling now. "Why have you been observing us?" "Because you remind me of someone I lost a long time ago." His voice cracked slightly, a sound so unexpected that Maya stopped counting currency and stared. "My sibling. She was a single parent too. Struggled to feed her little girl, worked 3 occupations, never asked anyone for help. too proud, too scared. The bake shop had gone completely silent except for the soft flickering of the decorations on Amelia's tart. "What happened to her?" Clara whispered. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. She perished in a traffic collision driving home from her third occupation at 2 o'clock in the morning. She was so exhausted, she fell asleep at the wheel. Her daughter, my niece, went into foster care. I never saw her again. Amelia looked up at the tall man with the sad eyes and asked innocently, "Do you miss them?" The question hit Vincenzo like a physical blow. For 30 years, he had built barriers around that pain, buried it under layers of rage and power and violence. But this 7-year-old girl, with her honest eyes and her birth anniversary pastry, had just walked straight through every defense he had. "Every day," he said softly. Every single day, Maya had finished packing the food, but she didn't dare interrupt. The other patrons remained frozen, witnessing something they would never forget. The moment when the city's most feared man revealed the broken heart he had been carrying for 3 decades. "I can't bring them back," Vincenzo continued, looking directly at Clara. "But I can make sure you and Amelia don't end up like them. I can make sure you never have to choose between sleeping and working, between feeding your daughter and keeping her safe." Clara shook her head. "I don't understand. What do you want from us?" "Nothing," Vincenzo said. "I want to give you something. A position, a flat, a chance for Amelia to go to institution and have companions and extinguish birth anniversary decorations every year until she's too old to make desires." The door chimed as a black sedan pulled up outside. Through the window, Clara could see 2 men in expensive attire waiting by the vehicle. "Those are my partners," Vincenzo explained. "They're going to drive us to a structure I own downtown. It has flats, and one of them is vacant. It has 2 sleeping rooms, a cooking area, and windows that face the sunrise. Amelia would have her own room with a bed and a wardrobe, and space for all the books she could ever want." Amelia tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, does that mean I could have my own bed? Like the kids on television?" Clara was weeping again. But these tears were different. They carried hope and terror and disbelief all tangled together. "Why would you do this? You don't even know us." "Because," Vincenzo said, picking up the tart with surprising gentleness, "sometimes the cosmos gives you a second chance to do the right thing. And I've been waiting 30 years for mine." But what happened next would reveal that Vincenzo's offer came with complications nobody expected, because helping Clara and Amelia meant bringing them into his sphere. And his sphere had adversaries who wouldn't hesitate to use a destitute woman and her daughter as tools against him. As they prepared to leave the bake shop, none of them noticed the man in the corner booth who had been pretending to peruse a gazette. He folded it carefully, pulled out his phone, and made a call of his own. "Boss," he said quietly, "Vincenzo Rossi just acquired some strays. A woman and a child. Looks like he's getting feeble. Thought you should know." The voice on the other end was cold, calculating. "Follow them. Find out where he's taking them. If Rossi cares about them, they're valuable to us." Clara, holding Amelia's hand as they walked toward the black sedan, had no idea that accepting Vincenzo's kindness had just painted a target on both their backs. The sedan's engine purred quietly as they drove through the city thoroughfares. But inside the car, tension crackled like electrical discharge. Amelia sat between Clara and Vincenzo, clutching her birth anniversary tart box with both hands, as if it might vanish if she let go. Clara stared out the window, watching familiar districts blur past, each segment taking them further from the only world she knew and deeper into something that terrified her. Vincenzo made another phone call, his voice sharp and formal. "Nick, I need you to inspect the structure. Complete sweep. Then I want 2 men stationed outside, 2 more in the foyer. Subtle, but conspicuous." He paused, listening to the response. "Because I said so. That's all the reason you need." Clara's stomach dropped. "What's happening? Why do you need guards?" "It's just a safeguard," Vincenzo said. But his eyes were scanning the street behind them through the rear-view mirror. "In my occupation, you learn to be cautious about everything." Amelia looked up at him with innocent curiosity. "What kind of occupation do you do?" The question hung in the air like fumes from a firearm. Clara held her breath, realizing she was about to learn exactly what kind of man had just become their savior. Vincenzo studied the little girl's face, those honest eyes that hadn't yet learned to fear the world the way her mother's had. I assist people in resolving their issues, he said carefully. Sometimes those issues are intricate, like repairing shattered objects. Something like that, darling. Clara wasn't fooled by the gentle explanation. She had lived on the pavements long enough to recognize peril in all its forms. She knew Vincenzo Rossi's reputation, had heard the stories whispered in shelters and soup kitchens. People who opposed him disappeared. Businesses that refused to cooperate burned down. Law enforcement who investigated too closely found themselves relocated to different cities. But she also knew what desperation felt like. She knew what it meant to watch your daughter grow thinner each day, to see hope fade from her eyes like decorations being extinguished. And despite every instinct screaming at her to flee, despite every rational thought telling her this was a mistake, she couldn't bring herself to reject the first real kindness they had received in months. The structure they pulled up to was nothing like Clara expected. Instead of some dark, menacing fortress, it was a refurbished, brick-flat complex with floral containers in the windows and children's bikes secured to the front railings. Families walked in and out of the main entrance, carrying provisions and pushing carriages, living regular lives. "This is it," Vincenzo announced as the vehicle stopped. "Fourth floor, flat 15. It's been vacant for 6 months, but I had it cleaned and furnished last week." Clara's confusion deepened. "Last week, but you said you'd been observing us for 3 weeks." Vincenzo got out of the car and opened Amelia's door, helping her out with the same gentleness he had shown in the bake shop. "I've been contemplating this for longer than 3 weeks. You two just gave me the courage to finally do something about it." As they walked toward the structure entrance, Clara noticed the two men in dark attire standing near the corner. They nodded respectfully at Vincenzo, but kept their distance, more security, she realized. Whatever world they were entering, it was one where safeguarding was essential. The foyer was clean and bright with postal boxes lining one wall and a small seating area near the lift. An elderly woman tending to plants near the window smiled at Amelia and complimented her on the tart box she was carrying. It felt surreal, this normalcy existing alongside the undercurrent of peril that followed Vincenzo everywhere. They rode the lift in silence, Amelia pressing her face against the small window to watch the floors pass bump by beam. Clara's mind raced with questions and fears. What would happen when other tenants discovered who their new resident was? What if Vincenzo's adversaries found out where they lived? What if this kindness came with a price she couldn't afford to pay? Flat 15 was more beautiful than anything Clara had imagined. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating polished floors and walls, painted in soft, inviting hues. The furnishings were simple but comfortable, and Amelia's sleeping room was decorated with shelves for books and a small writing desk where she could do school assignments when she started institution. "The refrigerator is stocked," Vincenzo explained, opening the cooking area cabinets to show them utensils and glasses and all the basic necessities of residence. "The utilities are paid for the next year. There's a good primary school 7 blocks away, and Isabel downstairs can assist with child minding if you need to work." Amelia ran from room to room, her excitement overflowing as she discovered each new marvel. A real washroom with a tub, a cooking area with a window that looked out over a small courtyard, a sleeping room with a bed that had clean sheets and pillows that smelled like lavender instead of disinfectant. Clara stood in the middle of the living area, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. "I don't understand how to accept this. We don't have anything to give you in return. You're giving me something just by being here," Vincenzo said quietly. "You're giving me a chance to remember who I used to be before I became the man everyone fears." But even as he spoke those words, his phone buzzed with a text message that made his expression harden. The message was short and threatening. "Nice new acquaintance that you have, Vincenzo. Pretty little girl. Would hate for anything to happen to her." Vincenzo's blood went cold. Julian Moretti, his biggest rival, had already learned about Clara and Amelia. The man who had been following them from the bake shop worked faster than Vincenzo had anticipated. He quickly typed a response to Nick, his head of security. "Alert level high, they found them. Triple the protection." Clara noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. "What's wrong?" Vincenzo looked at Amelia, who was in her new sleeping room, arranging plush toys on her bed and humming softly to herself. The joy in her voice was pure and innocent, untainted by knowledge of the darkness that was already reaching toward her. "There are some people who won't be happy about my decision to help you," he admitted. "People who see kindness as frailty and try to exploit it." The weight of understanding settled on Clara's shoulders like a heavy blanket. By accepting Vincenzo's help, by bringing Amelia into this flat, she had unknowingly made her daughter a target. The very thing she had been trying to protect Amelia from by living on the pavements, staying inconspicuous, keeping their heads down, had found them. "Let's go, you," she said immediately. "We can go back to the shelter. We can vanish again." "No." Vincenzo's voice carried absolute authority. "Fleeing won't solve this now. They know who you are. They know Amelia's face. The only way to keep you safe is to keep you near." Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. "What have we done? What have I done to her?" Amelia appeared in the doorway, still clutching one of the plush toys she had found on her bed. "Mama, why are you crying? Don't you like our new dwelling?" Clara knelt down and pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, breathing in the scent of her hair and trying to memorize the feeling of holding her safe and near. Because deep down she knew their lives had just become infinitely more intricate and perilous. Vincenzo watched them, his own heart breaking for the second time that day. He had wanted to rescue them, to give them the life his sibling and niece never got to have. Instead, he had painted targets on their backs and dragged them into a war they didn't comprehend. But there was no going back now. Julian Moretti had made his move, and Vincenzo would have to respond. The only question was whether he could protect Clara and Amelia while fighting a conflict that had been brewing for years. As evening shadows began to stretch across the flat floor, none of them knew that 3 blocks away, Julian Moretti was already planning his next move. And his plan involved more than just menacing messages. It involved taking everything Vincenzo cared about and using it to obliterate him completely. Julian Moretti was not a patient man. While Vincenzo sat in the flat with Clara and Amelia, Julian was 3 blocks away in the rear room of his eatery, studying surveillance photographs spread across a dark wood table like playing cards in a lethal game. His fingers drummed against the wood as he examined each image. Clara walking Amelia to the playground. Amelia reading at the library. Vincenzo kneeling beside the little girl in the bake shop. 30 years, Julian muttered to his second in command, Leo Barone. 30 years I've been trying to find Vincenzo's weakness, and it walks into a bake shop asking for expired tart. Leo shifted uncomfortably. He had worked for Julian long enough to recognize that tone, the way his boss's voice turned soft and dangerous when he was planning something particularly wicked. "What's the maneuver, boss?" Julian picked up the photo of Amelia holding her tart box, her face glowing with innocent joy. "Vincenzo thinks he's safeguarding them by keeping them near. But closeness works both ways. The closer they are to him, the easier they are for us to access." Back at the flat, Vincenzo was teaching Amelia how to ignite the decorations on her birth anniversary tart properly, his massive hands guiding her small fingers as she struck each igniter. Clara watched from the cooking area doorway, her heart torn between thankfulness and dread. This man who had shown them such unexpected kindness was the same person whose adversaries now wanted to use her daughter as a weapon. "Make a desire, darling," Vincenzo said softly as all 8 decorations flickered to life. Amelia closed her eyes tight, her face scrunched in concentration. When she opened them again, she looked directly at Vincenzo. "I desired that you wouldn't be mournful anymore about your sibling and your niece." The words hit Vincenzo like a physical blow. He had been carrying that sorrow for 3 decades, had built an empire on the foundation of that pain. And this 7-year-old girl, with her honest heart, had just offered to take it away with a birth anniversary desire. Clara saw the tears gathering in his eyes and felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the calculating monster she had expected. This was a broken man trying to mend wounds that had never properly sealed. "Thank you, Amelia," Vincenzo whispered. "That's the most lovely desire anyone has ever made." But their moment of peace was shattered by the sound of Vincenzo's phone ringing. He glanced at the caller ID and his entire demeanor changed, shoulders tensing, jaw hardening. "I have to take this." He stepped into the passage, closing the flat door behind him. Clara pressed her ear against the wood, straining to hear fragments of conversation. "What do you mean they're gone?" Vincenzo's voice was sharp with rage. How did two men just vanish from their posts? Clara's blood turned to ice. The security personnel outside the structure, the ones who were supposed to protect them, had disappeared. Find them, Vincenzo continued, and get a full crew here now. Julian's initiating his plan. Clara pulled away from the door, her mind racing. She looked at Amelia, who was carefully slicing her tart into perfect triangles, completely unaware that peril was closing in around them like a snare. Amelia, Clara said, forcing her voice to remain composed, we need to engage in a diversion. Remember how we used to practice being very hushed when we resided at the shelter? Amelia looked up, tart icing on her chin. Are we engaging in conceal and search? Something like that. Sweetheart, I need you to go to your room and get beneath the bed. Stay there until Mommy comes to get you, okay? No matter what you perceive. Amelia's face fell. But what about my tart? We'll reserve it for later. I guarantee. Vincenzo burst back through the door just as Clara was helping Amelia into her sleeping room. His face was severe and he was speaking rapidly into his phone while simultaneously checking the fastenings on the windows. Nick, where's my reinforcement? They should have been here 10 minutes ago. He paused, listening to the response. What do you mean the structure's encompassed? By whom? Clara felt her knees go frail. They were cornered. Vincenzo ended the call and turned to face her, his expression mixing apology with resolve. Clara, I need you to listen carefully. Julian Moretti has individuals positioned around this structure. My security unit is either deceased or compromised. We're alone until additional support arrives. How long? Clara's voice was barely a murmur. 20 minutes. Perhaps 30. Clara thought about Amelia hiding beneath the bed in her new sleeping room, about the birth anniversary tart sitting abandoned on the cooking area table, about how quickly their miracle had turned into a calamity. There's something else, Vincenzo said quietly. Julian doesn't just want to hurt you to get to me. He wants to abduct Amelia. The words hung in the air like noxious vapor. Clara felt something primitive and fierce rise up inside her chest. Something that had been inactive during months of quiet desperation, but was now roaring to life. Over my lifeless body, she said, and Vincenzo saw something in her eyes that reminded him why he had survived 30 years in an enterprise where most men didn't last 5. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say, he replied, reaching into his coat and pulling out a small firearm. Because we're going to have to struggle for her. Clara stared at the implement. She had never held a firearm in her life, had never imagined herself capable of brutality. But as she thought about Julian Moretti's hands reaching for her daughter, about Amelia's innocent trust and birth anniversary desires, she discovered reserves of power she didn't know existed. Show me how to utilize it, she said. 3 floors below, Julian's men were already moving through the structure, using purloined keys to access the service lifts and emergency stairwells. They moved like apparitions, skilled professionals who specialized in making difficulties vanish silently. Julian himself waited in his vehicle across the thoroughfare, watching the flat windows through optical instruments. He had planned this operation meticulously, accounting for every variable except one. He had underestimated what a mother would do to safeguard her child. Inside the flat, Vincenzo was giving Clara a rapid lesson in handling firearms while simultaneously blocking the front door with furnishings. Keep both hands on the grasp, aim down the barrel, press, don't pull the actuator. And Clara, if it comes down to choosing between your existence and Amelia's safety, you choose Amelia every instance. Clara nodded, surprised by how natural the weight of the firearm felt in her hands. What about you? I've been getting ready for this conflict my entire existence. Julian thinks he's pursuing a vulnerable woman and child. He's about to discover he's walked into a snare. The lift chimed softly in the passage outside their door. Vincenzo held up his hand for silence, then moved to the window and peered through the blinds. 4 men in the passage, 2 more visible on the fire escape outside. They're here, he whispered. Clara crept toward Amelia's sleeping room, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone in the structure could hear it. She found her daughter exactly where she had left her, curled up beneath the bed with her plush toy, eyes wide but obedient. Stay here no matter what transpires, Clara whispered. If strangers enter, you don't make a noise. Can you do that for Mommy? Amelia nodded solemnly. Clara kissed her brow and returned to the living area just as the first soft rap came at the door. It was courteous, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying than if they had simply tried to smash it down. "Mr. Rossi," a voice called through the door. "We just want to confer." Vincenzo looked at Clara and mouthed the words Julian's voice. The gunfire lasted exactly 17 minutes when the haze cleared and the alerts finally faded into the distance. 3 lives had been forever altered by a single moment of unexpected kindness in a small bake shop. Julian Moretti would never threaten another family. Vincenzo Rossi discovered that redemption was possible even for men like him. And Clara learned that sometimes the most dangerous people in the world can also be the most protective. Amelia still has that birth anniversary tart every year, though now it sits on a cooking area table in a house where laughter echoes through every room and where a man who once ruled through fear learned to love through healing. Sometimes the smallest acts of pity create the biggest changes in the world. And if you enjoyed this moving narrative, please consider liking this video, subscribing to Ebon Stories, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below.